So I want to make an assertion, which is that in the not too distant future, everyone will be a news publisher. And what I mean by that is not that everyone will be a blogger or anything like that. What I mean is literally a news publisher with high fidelity, high quality, professional content on their sites. And that sounds like a far-fetched statement. Consider that 10 years ago, if somebody just said everyone will have ads, it would sound kind of crazy as well, right? But thanks to Google, they made it so easy to add ads, just turnkey, efficient, automated, that every single site on the planet now has an ad. So I'll say that if it's as easy as AdSense to add professional, high-quality news content to your services, to a site, and every site's about something, every site will have some. And this feature isn't that far off. So take a look at this. So this is Purina. Now, Purina is a company which makes cat food and dog food, okay? And they launched a portal around cat and dog news and content information using one editor plus day life. So, and they're a cat food company, okay? And that's happening today. So the question is, in the future where there's thousands of sites, all of whom are publishing professional, high-quality news content from other sources onto their own services, who wins, right? So to borrow a phrase from my friend Chris Willis, in this day and age, navigation and convenience are the new pipes. And what I mean by that is, in an offline world, as Ed was talking about earlier, the folks who had the trucks and the printing presses and the paper, or the broadcast towers or the radio towers, were the ones who owned the distribution, right? But online, the folks who own distribution are folks like Google, right? Google is the most convenient place to navigate the world of websites. YouTube is the most convenient, easy way to navigate the world of videos, right? So for your own publications, you have to ask yourself the question, how can you offer the best navigation in the world beyond your own content? Because there's a whole world out there, people know it, and they're leaving sites to go and find everything else out there on various topics. So how are you going to be the best site to navigate the world of pet news, or basketball news, or politics, or what have you? And so, or to put it another way, as Edward said earlier, do what you do best and outsource the rest. This is basically a fancy way of saying this. And so, one solution for this is Daylife. So what Daylife does is, we're a platform for helping you to curate the whole world around your own content. So, we let you add pages, thousands of pages, sections, little categories of content to your own services in your own voice, look and feel, and brand. So, for example, one of our partners is actually The Telegraph, who launched a section on green and eco content a little while ago, using their own original content, plus Daylife for everything else around it. And being able to do it at scale. So one of our partners is Turner Sports. And Turner Sports launched sites on the NBA, MLB, PGA, and NASCAR with photography, videos, quotes, articles, so forth, thousands of pages, using no editorial staff, just Daylife powering these pages. So, and so thousands of pages run on their own automatically. But for this model to work for any real brand, for any real publisher, it has to be malleable and really match your own voice and look and feel and personality. And so a service like Daylife lets you, add more content from around the web. If you outsource the rest, it has to be in your own voice and look and feel. So publishers, like you said today, are launching portals around, say, cruise lines, using one blogger, in this case Gene Sloan, blogging about cruise lines, and Daylife for everything else, but integrated way which is seamless, with hundreds of pages, and it's all one uniform voice, look and feel, and brand. And of course, all this is kind of a moot point if you can't actually monetize it. And we're happy to say that our publishers using Daylife were actually able to sell Daylife-powered pages at the same CPMs as their fully editorially driven pages. In other words, advertisers have been indifferent to pages which are 100% editorially driven, half Daylife, half editorial, or fully Daylife driven, because these pages are in a certain look, almost done, in a certain look, voice, and brands, and so on. And last point is, engineering kind of sucks. I mean, engineering is hard, it's boring, it's a lot of work, and it's expensive. And so for publishers, it's sort of a distraction. It should just be sort of an outsourced service the way AdSense is, just sort of out of the way. And so if the engineering is actually easy, you can actually focus on being creative and trying out new things. So actually experimenting and trying out new experiences, around different ways to navigate the world of news, the way the Washington Post and some other folks who are using our service have, just trying out different ways to explore content. So anyway, any further questions, you can find Tom over there later on, and we'll give you some demos of some stuff in the wild working live. So thanks.
Thank you. Something dangerous to try to do in 5 minutes is I'm going to talk about something that at this point is highly conceptual, but I want to get people talking about it, and also have the advantage, disadvantage of saying some things that you've already heard before. This has a lot to do with distribution networks, which you've heard a lot talk about, but I also want to introduce the concept of the newswire, which is actually an old concept, but I think one that can be very relevant. What we're looking at doing is transforming the newswire from a cost center, and one that news organizations are increasingly feeling that they can't afford, into a source of revenue, maybe even a large source of revenue. And we want to do that by putting news organizations back into the distribution business, which of course is where the money is. And of course, you've heard this from other people today. Newspapers were never really in the news or the content business. They've always been in the distribution business. But on the web, distribution is driven by links. And what happened was when media moved to the web, basically news organizations handed the web's link economy to Google on a silver platter because they didn't recognize how the distribution paradigm had changed on the web. But we think it's not too late for news organizations to get into this linking game, into the distribution economy on the web in a very big way. So just very briefly, what Publish To does is we've created an editorial system, in some ways similar to Daylight, but we're actually powered by humans for creating news aggregation features and curating links at scale. And at the core of it is a platform for editors, reporters, anybody in the newsroom to save, organize, and then publish on your sites links through widgets and through feeds. And rather than it falling on the shoulders of one individual, one poor editor, one poor reporter, we've made a way for it to do it collaboratively, because many humans together can accomplish what one alone cannot. And you can start to think about a concept of harnessing the collective intelligence of the entire newsroom. But we want to see it go beyond just the newsroom, and here's where it gets a bit radical. Of course, this includes the print folks in the newsroom, is if you have many newsrooms doing these link aggregations through our system, it actually can start to become like a newswire. It can become a platform for distributing links across many news organizations, and even into the social networks. We're creating API connections into Twitter, into Delicious, into Facebook, into where all these links are already being distributed on the web. So the question then is, why do we need a newswire for links? Why can't we as a news organization, as a media company, just do this by ourselves? Why do we have to tap into a newswire, do it on some kind of common platform? And I think the answer is what I was referring to before, is that together, human editorial intelligence, if you map together all of the human editorial intelligence across all the newsrooms in the world, you could actually get something that could compete with algorithms in filtering all the vast content of the web, which seems sort of an impossible task for a human to do, and why algorithms have been so successful. And I think together, if news organizations together, they could actually create a link-driven distribution system, a newswire for links that could actually compete with search at that scale for influencing what content gets attention on the web. And so I want to sort of anticipate what the reaction is, especially the big media company, to a notion like this of connecting together with other media companies. Is, we'll go off and do this by ourselves. That's what we already are. We're already getting into the aggregation business. Okay? And thing is, any individual media company can't at the scale that I'm talking about. Okay? On the web, news orgs have lost their monopoly, and they're just one news on the node on the network. So even a big media company has limited scale. But together, they could have incredible scale, okay? Because Google makes all its money off of harnessing the entire network, the entire web. And to unlock the economic value in the web, in the distribution model, news orgs need to create together a really large network, okay? Because as you heard from Tom, the larger the network, the more value that it creates. Okay? The reaction says, no, 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 we have to own it because that's what media companies have traditionally done, right? But you can't own the network. Even Google doesn't own the network. So to create a big network like this, you actually have to collaborate. And that actually requires the inverse of the traditional business model. But if you think about it, newswires have always been about collaboration. So to get to the punchline here about the business model, just how do you monetize, if you created such a network for links, the web, how would you actually monetize it? I don't think that you can do it through display advertising, because display advertising really has become, in many ways, an old media commodity. And I saw 25% average CPM the other day, which figure out how much you can buy with, say, $250,000 at a 25-cent CPM. What we want to do is actually create a new form of advertising whose value to the consumer is perfectly aligned with the value of news aggregation to the consumer, because this is what search advertising does. The value of that search ad is perfectly aligned with the search result. You search for something relevant, and here's a bunch of relevant links. So to use a shorthand, what we want to do is create an AdWords for news, but to scale it up across all news organizations. We want to create, last slide, a giant liquid marketplace for news. So that's the big vision. The bigger it is, the more pricing power it has. And even if the big media company reaction is, we don't want to do this with anyone else, we still need to do this on their own, what we're finding is that all of the small media companies network together, and they're open to these kind of collaborative models much more, can actually create as much economic value as one big media company trying to do it by itself. So,
let me just provide some brief context for some of the lessons we've learned so far and kind of the implications on the business model I'll talk about. First one is my first web experience was on Microsoft's Sidewalk project, rolling out that. I was part of the founding team rolling out cities. So I've proven you can hemorrhage a lot of money doing that, and so we're trying to do the other end of the continuum. 3 years ago, I bought a local site in a resort community. Site's called Sun Valley Online, and focused on making it profitable. Fortunately, we did that. In the intervening time, partnered with Jonathan Weber, who some of you may be familiar with, that he was co-founder with John Battelle of the Industry Standard, and he started a site called newwest.net. And essentially what we're doing is expanding on some of the successes that we've had and building a larger network along the lines of what's been talked about. The third little context is essentially probably where I got the most insight was I made myself a sales guy. And so I'm very familiar with how the P&Gs and Microsofts of the world think about. So you can imagine spending a lot of time with local merchants, insurance agents, and whatnot. They think and act very differently, and that's provided some lessons learned, which there's 4 I'll highlight. First of all, kind of somewhat related to the Sidewalk experience, the major cost of local plays is the content. So we have to be very crafty about keeping that low in order to survive. Second is we've found that user-generated content and automation has some pretty severe limitations in terms of building a passionate user base. Just to give an example, earlier this week, we sent out a survey to our readers that the average amount, there's like 80-some questions, the average time to complete it was 33 minutes. I thought the research company was insane to do this. In 24 hours, we had 10% of our user base complete that, and it's given us great insights. And that's key to selling high CPMs, is to have terrific insights. Third key lesson is the cost of customer or advertiser customer acquisition has really crushed the vast majority of pure play local plays. And so we got to tackle that. And finally, one of the key takeaways I found that actually Dave Morgan's comments sort of spoke to this is that the local businesses really saw us as their trusted online advisor. And so that got us to think in a little bit different way. In terms of business model implications, on the first point, I think Jonathan coined this term pro-am journalism. And what we've done is essentially applied that, and we essentially have a modest staff that creates content, solicits content, curates content, and that has been very key because we're not sister organization to some existing media property. We don't get a bunch of free content like a lot of online properties do, especially in the local space. The second thing that we really questioned was the conventional wisdom of feet on the street for Salesforce. One of the key members of our team was the architect of Dell's inside sales organization, which I view as really the gold standard of low-cost customer acquisition. And we just feel like we've got to be operational efficiency freaks in order to play in this space, and there's a lot of detail there. Third implication, it's been surprising, a lot of the newspapers that we've been inviting into our curated ad network actually want us to rep their ad inventory, and kind of relates to the final point I was going to make, in that one of the things that we've realized is instead of being a purveyor of just our own display ad inventory, we, as our local business providers, trusted online advisor, there's a lot of tools in the toolkit for online marketing. And so we've gone out and picked essentially best of breed tools that then we're aggregating. In effect, we're kind of their local online ad agency along the lines of what David Morgan was speaking about. And it allows us to basically get greater access to a greater share of their wallet. So that's it. Thank you.
So I think I'll just tackle this from the standpoint of how we've built with Science Blogs a network of bloggers who are experts in all areas of science that we initially launched in the United States about 2 years ago. And we recognized that there was a kind of community of experts and of people who are curious about science at varying degrees and who really wanted to engage with our brand, with Seed, with the magazine in ways that we hadn't necessarily invited this community really into our company, into our media company. And so what we sought to do with launching Science Blogs a couple years ago was to kind of expand the footprint of Seed and its mission of sort of achieving scientific literacy around the world, which is...
Don't hit that button.
Don't hit that button.
Kill everything.
All right. By kind of contextualizing the conversation that we start in Seed with a much broader conversation, a much broader community that we're able to establish online now with Science Blogs. So two things I think I'd sort of highlight is one is, so Science Blogs itself, let me just drive forward on that.
You gotta point to this.
To that. All right. And I've got a sign over there. We're really magazine people and we just happen to use computers every so often. So this is what Science Blogs looked like. So I thought I would mention two quick points. One is kind of just how we built this network, and then I thought what might be even more interesting is how we, in the context of a media company that was founded with a print title, has kind of used a new media platform, a social media platform, to really achieve some exciting business goals that we couldn't have done just with Seed. So Science Blogs is now a collection of a network of blogs, a network of expert bloggers who are all professional scientists in life sciences and physical sciences and the environment and technology. Initially around the United States, we've just built a new tier for Science Blogs in Europe in partnership with Berta in Germany. We'll be launching it in Brazil in the next few weeks and elsewhere around the world over the next few months. And our ambition is really to create a platform where the world will meet to talk about science. So not only starting from the position of these are experts, but really where anybody who has even the most novice general interest in how science affects their life, how science affects design, how science affects the environment, health and medicine, alternative energy, and we're really, because of the diversity of content and the quality of the experts who are blogging as part of our network, we're able to create a pretty rich conversation. What we've really sought to do over the last couple of years is find really innovative ways of integrating Seed, our flagship magazine, our flagship consumer magazine, with Science Blogs as this broader network. And I thought I would just sort of touch on a few of these integrations really quickly. One is that by having Science Blogs juxtaposed with Seed in our portfolio, Seed is allowed to say things and just live in the world of saying things. And Science Blogs is there to respond to it. And so we don't seek to foster conversation around Seed. We seek to foster conversation using Science Blogs about Seed. Second is that advertising in Seed allows brands, sort of thought leadership brands who work with us, to work on positioning and just live in the world of positioning and not try to interact, not try to engage, and then go to Science Blogs to really engage. And so we're able to take a campaign from Shell, for example, and really work on energy positioning messaging in the magazine, and then build a big alternative energy forum on science blogs and have the conversation there. It allows us to keep Seed exclusive, which is actually kind of our perspective. We really want Seed to be an exclusive brand, both economically, so we're able to build a business model with higher CPMs, but also as a brand, we see it as a thought leadership brand and as an influence brand, whereas Science Blogs is a popular brand. And again, the juxtaposition allows us to do that. Science Blogs is informed by having this community of 2 million people and 100 bloggers around the world. Science Blogs is informing the editorial of Seed, so we now have effectively 100 contributing editors who feed back through editors in New York into our editorial process as we drive the magazine, as we drive our websites. We've built columns in Seed based on successes of bloggers on Science Blogs. So we're able to see that an expert has built a community of 20,000 or 100,000, and that's reason enough to build a column in the magazine. We see an efficient customer acquisition model that's been built here. Of course, we're able to now tap into this much broader community that we recognize to be sort of corollary, to be an extension of the Seed brand and the Seed community, but much bigger, much broader. And of course, it becomes a very efficient customer acquisition model for us, for Seed, for branded extensions off of Seed. We're able to sort of leverage global growth. We're able to bring science blogs into markets, and this is something we're beginning to do now. It's a much broader platform, and then follow it with introducing more costly properties, but we're able to sort of test markets much more efficiently and really much faster by bringing science blogs and kind of leveraging our global growth. 2 quick points. Science Blogs has expanded the Seed community very obviously, and it's expanded the Seed brand into a bigger audience. And finally, what Science Blogs has allowed us to do is, as we're diversifying our own company, Seed Media Group, to have also a software and a technology business, Science Blogs is providing us with real insights into what the research science community needs in terms of new media that's fueling new business development because we're directly in contact with the influencers in science.
From Jeff. But so I'm working on a project called Spot Us, which is at the URL spot.us. I was thinking about launching it this week, but got distracted with this. So it's going to be probably launching next week. But Spot Us is community-funded reporting. So what that means is it's the act of distributing the cost of hiring a journalist across lots of different people. So it's essentially relying on a gift economy, which in the United States is something in the billions of dollars. The biggest recipients are churches and schools, things like that. So is journalism a public good that people will donate towards? We've already actually launched sort of an alpha test using just a wiki, and we've raised, for example, we raised $2,500 from 74 different donors, giving an average of $33 each, which hired a journalist to fact-check the political ads for the upcoming San Francisco election. We're actually launching in San Francisco. This is for, we're funded by the Night News Challenge, which is for local journalism. Eventually, we may expand into other cities. So how does it work? I'll break down the functions of the site as quickly as I can. Anyone can create a quote-unquote story tip, right? So John Q. Citizen says, I want someone to look into my kid's school or, you know, the environmental degradation in the, creek, whatever. And people can join that and pledge to it. And no money actually transacts. It's sort of like joining a group. You know, I want to see this happen. Journalists come in and they create pitches, which are a little bit more in depth. It includes, you know, their background as a journalist, what they're going to deliver, right? I'll produce, a 1,000-word article and yada, yada, yada. And that's what people donate towards, and that's where the actual money transaction happens. The finished content will actually give away to local news organizations. I should have also mentioned we're a nonprofit, but so if the Oakland Tribune or the San Jose Mercury News, Chris O'Brien is here from the Mercury News, if they want it, we'll put a little bow around it and give it to them. If they want exclusive rights to the content, they have to donate either 50% or more towards the journalism, and then they'll get temporary exclusive rights. Any extra proceeds go back to the original donors. So John Q. Citizen gets their $25 back, and they can invest in another investigation, right? So it becomes its own little microeconomy. Are you? All right. So I'm trying to. So that's the basic functionality of the site, and we're going to be launching next week. And it's very much experimental, but the idea is to both turn journalism into a process, not a product, right? Because it is participatory. You need the public to sort of seed the original investigation, and it's also a way that news organizations can sort of stretch their freelance budget. They can put half of the money down for an investigation, and if the community funds the other half, then they'll go forward and have finished content. And so for the sake of trying to be brief, I'll say this, I'm really, really passionate about it. You know, I think just like Jeff says, public support for journalism is not a silver bullet. I never claim that this is going to support entire newsrooms, but kiva.org, which is, I should say, the gift economy is also being revolutionized on the web. Kiva.org circulates $1 million every 10 days. Donors Choose, which does this very same thing of small donations toward teachers, raised $8 million last year. Can journalism tap into that gift economy? And so I'm creating a platform that allows independent journalists to do that. Kiva.org. I should say, I'm really passionate about it. If you have questions, come talk to me. That's what a lot of the lunch period will be about. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Yay. And you can tell that David's closer to high school than we are because he called it the lunch period. Sorry, David. There are tons of people around here whose name tags you're going to want to seek out who are doing interesting things as well. So you got Deb Gallant from baristanet.com is around here who is talking about, who has 100 advertisers now on her local site and 10,000 visitors a day. You have Steve Adler and John Byrne from Business Week who've just started a new site I'll let them tell you about that enables their audience to come in and create content and topic pages. Edward Sussman, who just left Fast Company, is starting a new social journalism product. Meryl Brown can tell you about Now Public. Jim Spanfeller at Forbes has an ad network, though I want him to listen to Tom Evsland's economics. Real quick here, Fred Wilson has invested in all kinds of interesting companies like Tumblr and Twitter, and he can explain them to you. Eric Stein from Google, Eric, put up your hand, where are you? Is doing the local ad initiative from Google. He can be your helpmate, right? Okay. Jochen Wegner here from, we have people from around the world here. So Jochen, for example, is here from Focus Online in Germany, and Wolfgang Blau from Die Zeit Online next to him. We have people here from Germany, Canada, France, Benoit Raphael, Benoit, there, back here. Le Post.fr is doing amazing citizen stuff. Jennifer Carroll from Gannett has reorganized her newsrooms in all kinds of news ways. Did Nick Denton show up? He sleeps late. Alan Mutter from Newsosaur is a blog you've read. Alan, throw your hand up somewhere. Who has all kinds of new models. Rick Smolin here, who you all know did the books, Brain Drain, Day in Life of America, Day in Life of other things, and now has a new beautiful book about water that you're all going to get thanks to Rick and his foundation as you go out of here. He's found ways to have sponsors create books, which I think is very interesting. Timo Koskinen from Nokia is around here somewhere, who worked with Reuters on the Mojo project and other projects of using mobile technology for journalism. Ernie Sander, is Ernie here? He was now moved from Wall Street Journal to paid content. Craig Newmark is in the back. Hi, Craig. Who you all know, but is fascinating over lunch if he can stay around. Richard Toffel from ProPublica is coming later. Yeah, there he is, there, thank you. Which fits in with the last topic. Persephone Meal. All kinds of magnificent things coming out of Harvard and Berkman Center. Peter Osnos, who is trying to save the book industry in all kinds of new and energizing ways. So that's just a quick sample of the kind of folks who are on the name tags around you. All right, can you bring mine back up? I think it's on the desktop. No, it's there. It's New Business Models, Jarvis. It should be at the right spot. Okay, next slide. Okay, I want to charge, my sister is a Presbyterian minister, so I remember going to the ordinations where you get the charge. There's the charge to the minister and the charge to the congregation. Here is your charge. So, you have 5 groups. Just play. But you're a Mac guy. So, 5 groups. You can go to newsinnovation.com when you get in your rooms after lunch, pull up newsinnovation.com, pull up the blog post that says charges to the groups. This is all there. But networks, the network group. How can you use networks to find, and I want you to, if I'm playing minister and I'm charging you, you'll go to hell unless you come back and we want to see some real ideas and real work product, both for new models that you have and for follow-up that we can do from CUNY. So how can we use networks in new ways to support journalism? What kinds are they? The underlying part is define network models that would work today. Who's in them, what kind of relationship, what value and benefit for each party, and how they're supported. Next, the newsrooms group, finding new efficiencies. What's the value in the newsrooms of the future? Is there still a room? What's the core value? And finally, so model the new newsroom: size, functions, jobs, relationships, and cost. I did a spreadsheet that was in my PowerPoint where I took a theoretical group of 100, newsroom of 100, with the job descriptions that I guessed were in that newsroom, and then I made it a theoretical newsroom of 70 with new job descriptions. That's one way to approach this. Do a spreadsheet. Use Google Docs, very handy, and you can do that. The news organizations, this comes out of the talks by Edward and Dave about rethinking what the structure of a company in the news industry can look like. I would suggest you look at it two ways. One, reorganizing an existing company, which is really what they talked about, but two, create a brand new company. God forbid, in some city in this country, some newspaper company is going to die from its crush of debt, and a newspaper is going to die, and there's going to be nothing there in that town. So how would you create something to fill that vacuum like that? I know a few people in this room have ideas. We'll be happy to share them with you, so figure that out. Revenue models. The silver bullet, please. You notice I have the least to say about this and the most words because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But we've got to define new prospects to pursue. Where is our real value? What are some new opportunities? New ad models? Do we need new measurements? What do we need as an industry to say? Is there revenue other than advertising? As I say, Kevin McCain here from Consumer Reports, everybody would love to have that model. I think we all know that it's not possible for us all, but we'll keep going. Finally, public support. I have some people from foundations in the room so they can keep you honest and say, no, we won't pay for all newspapers. It ain't going to happen. But if you look at the example of what David has done, maybe public support can support slices of journalism. Maybe it can support investigative work in a given town. The question then becomes to me, what's the relationship of that to what's ProPublica's relationship with the New York Times or ProPublica jerseys to the Star Ledgers? I think that's the interesting thing, or Spot.us to the Star Ledger. So what can be realistically supported by public support from foundations, from individuals? And I would say from companies. I personally wouldn't throw government in that list. Finally, I would like you to come back to us with a charge back to us at CUNY. As Steve Shepard said, we have the Tower Center for Journalistic Innovation starting. We have a new business models for news project supported by both the MacArthur grant that paid for this and McCormick grant going forward. And we are, yes, begging for a lot more money because we have a $3 million matching grant. We got to find the match. I know it's tough times, but it's important for the industry. End of plug. Come back to us. This work will continue. But there are things that we can do out of here. We can bring together people to try to find new standards, new means to work together. We can examine models. We can make models. We can find best practices and share best practices. When you find things that say, gee, we wish someone would look at blank, come back and say that this afternoon. We wish someone would go out and find the best of blank. Tell us that this afternoon. Finally, we wish someone would bring together people who could figure this out. Tell us that this afternoon. That's your charge back to us. So the charge to you is to try to use new worldviews to find new models, and then come back with those models. Your rapporteurs, I love saying that, it seems so Aspen-like, are going to report back to the group. Then we'll have discussion. We're going to shave about 5 minutes off, 5 or 10 minutes off the group sessions and the wrap-up, so we'll end up on time.
We spent a bit of time agreeing to disagree on a lot of things, but actually we had forgive me if I sit down, we had a good convergence, I think, towards the end. I think one of the big things we started with is with the new news organization is what do you do with the current news organization? Do you blow it up and literally walk away and start something entirely different, or do you try to take some of the value that is there and bring it into something new? And I think we talked a lot about a lot of the problems with radically changing the news organization. But I think we got to the point that I think anybody wanted to sort of completely blow it up and walk away from it because there was a lot of really tangible value still in it that could be used in a new news organization. I think where we converged at the end, I mean, not to go through the whole conversation, is around an editorial, around a news organization that was very loosely structured and was built around a network, but at the center of it, and I think the core that everybody agreed had the value was an editorial intelligence, was that ability, those people who are have that intelligence to do journalism and to make judgments and that the people who created the content could exist either partially or entirely outside of the organization on a freelance or a stringer basis, and that even and we'll hear what the revenue model folks say, that that even the monetization of that, even the revenue model, could actually exist outside the news organization, where we could have better efficiencies, better economies of scale, but that editorial intelligence at the center would basically focus on what audience. This is 101, focus on what audiences want and serving different niche communities. We had some disagreement on whether the place of local in there, whether something could still be built around a locality, but whether it was a topical community that you're serving or a niche community you're serving, that editorial intelligence at the center, aided in some cases by algorithms, and doing curation of content that other people are creating, in addition to coordinating the creation of content themselves. And I think the key thing was scalability, that the structure was something that could build up as a business model built up, and that didn't face the key problem that we face right now, is that there's this legacy cost structure, which is really a wall that everybody keeps banging their heads against. Invite anyone else from our group to pop in something. I'm sure I missed 80% of the insights here, but that's all my brain has retained.
I'm making my entrepreneurial journalism students do their elevator pitch in Twitter this year.
Okay, I'll do that if you count the characters as I go. It is a news organization with editorial intelligence at the center that creates a scalable organization.
And it's not manufacturing, it's not distribution. Content creation could be outside. So what you're saying in the essence is the value then is editorial intelligence, curation, editing, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
That's the value. That's what the value is. And how does it make money?
Well, that's what the revenue group was supposed to
good.
figure out. We did actually talk quite a bit about, because it's hard to say what the organization should be if the organization's a business and the business exists to make money. It's sort of hard to disconnect the two, but I will. We talked about all sorts of different business models, but if there was any point of agreement, is that it can't just be advertising, and that actually, in the same way that the news organization has diversified ways of creating and curating content, it has to have diversified business models and not just have one source of revenue.
Almost 20 different revenue sources, and we started off talking about where we thought there was opportunity. We sort of went into a discussion, maybe a little venting for many of us, including me, who've been inside of the digital media arm of a traditional media business, and then came around to actually solving Joe the plumber's problem with Eric Stein. So first thing is data sales. I think a lot of folks maybe didn't realize, or there's an opportunity with the data that we have in terms of using it to better target advertising, working through systems like Dakota. We then talked about ad networks, which are very controversial. It's too bad Samir's not here. And I think that where we resolved is that ultimately brands matter more than the network itself. And over time, while many are impatient with this, the ad networks will largely become commodities. And so the need to hold on to your brand if you're generating revenue is still very important. Let's see. And there wasn't a real sense that this really seamless technology platform from advertising to local rep deals to exchanges to make it very easy for buyers to connect directly to publishers using technology is still a pretty long way off. We did spend a lot of time on this issue that's still fairly intractable for everybody, which is that fast-growing internet news operations inside of mainstream media, they've been completely reintegrated, and they're evaluated based on the same metrics as is the newspaper. And that is starting to really slow things down and make things frustrated, because you have one business that is in decline and another one where the incremental cost to serve a user is zero. And those two don't align. And then you still have this we talked a lot about how long it takes for a brand to build audience and how much faster that is than how long it takes for them to build any revenue. Larry Kramer from MarketWatch gave the example of you got to 1 million uniques in about 6 months, and to get to $10 million in revenue was significantly longer. Those are a lot of these intractable problems that we didn't solve, so I'm sorry about that. I guess that's next year's conference. I know. But then we talked a little bit about brands that are emerging and how Huffington Post freed of all these shackles, is able to do things being evaluated on different metrics, purely their own growth in traffic and revenue, and that they're seen as being hugely successful. Then we went into other revenue models. Our German friends from Focus talked about how they've actually become a direct retailer of products like financial services. And then we got down to some other models that we said, all right, up or down, are these going to work? Subscriptions, in general, we decided outside of premium financial data, sports, and porn was not scalable. And there were even some questions on how scalable porn was now. We can talk about that during cocktails. Virtual currencies seem to hold some opportunity down the road. What's going on in a lot of gaming, especially overseas in China, is pretty interesting. Video was sort of seen as just another extension of the same challenges that folks are having with display advertising. There's this big issue that is going to keep people up at night for a long time around measurement. And I think anyone who can solve the measurement problem will definitely be Vivian Schiller's best friend. And it will be a real help, but there aren't any solutions right now. Branded entertainment, actually, and product placement, giving advertisers ways to get their messages more into the content without crossing the church-state line seems to be scalable. And then the Motherlode, which is, Eric Stein, for those of you who don't know, runs the local AdSense product, resale product for Google. We got to help him make his bonus. And it was very clear that there's a big opportunity.
One company that still gives bonuses, I think.
Right, exactly. But there's a big opportunity here for a different paradigm, because especially for newspapers or TV stations, you've got a local sales force. You connect to the local audience. The technology is there already to sell locally targeted advertising, and hopefully one day to get to the point where, with good technology for integrating the ads themselves with superior geo-targeting, which right now is probably about 85% of the way there, you can really deliver a great experience to a user on your local site so they can find Joe the plumber if they're looking for unlicensed Republican plumbers, and a way actually to develop a new revenue model. So I think that's about it.
Stay on there for 1 second. Eric, you threw some numbers out when I was in the room. Where 80%, maybe you can just do it, but two sets of numbers that I found interesting. 23 million small businesses. What was the 23, 7 and 6? 17 and 6?
It's U.S. Census data. It's 23 million small businesses in the United States. 6 to 7 million of them have one employee or more. The rest, 17 million or so, are sole proprietorships, so consultant or stuff like that. And vast majority, I mean, this is where the point was headed, was vast majority of those businesses are not online. They don't have a website. I mean, half or so don't even have a website. How do you start to help them establish a presence online equal to the presence that they've had offline for all these years in Yellow Page phone books, et cetera?
Are there any stats on how many of those, how many small advertisers there are? How many of those advertise at Yellow Pages or anywhere? Do we know?
Yeah, so the Yellow Page industry is fairly concentrated. The 4 biggest Yellow Page companies in the country have about 90% of all ad revenue. In terms of listings in the Yellow Page phone book, there are about 13 million businesses, unpaid, total. In terms of paid listings, there's 3.5 to 4 million businesses that are paying for advertising in the phone book, and that's kind of going down.
And finally, you said that newspapers reach only 20% of the advertisers in their market. So there's 80%
Yeah, there are people here who can speak that better than me, but stuff that I've heard is newspapers reaching about 20% of the advertisers in their local communities, and the other 80% further kind of down the tail, they aren't scalable to reach. And I don't think we've done as good a job as we could to give people tools so that make that more affordable, scalable, what have you, but that's where it's headed, hopefully.
And where this heads then, I think, is Steve Newhouse still here? Oh, there you are, yeah. So I remember one day when you took me to the window at Condé Nast, and you said, yeah, I know, below, yes. Or someday this will all be yours. And said, it was too high up. It was 26th floor. Yeah, that was the trouble. So you said, Jeff, there are only so many Pradas and Gucci's for Condé Nast, but there's no limit of advertisers out there. And there's a scale out there that you and I believed in. You said it. You really did. You said it in terms of the scale. There seems to be, is there an opportunity in that untouched, unserved scale?
Yeah.
Or is it already in Yellow Pages and it's over?
No, there's a big opportunity. I mean, yeah, it has to be, and like I said, I think the tools and the service that is provided to those advertisers out from 26 floors up is hard to build and integrate into existing systems, et cetera. But that's where it kind of needs to go. And part of the service, part of the opportunity is ensuring that you have the right technology platform upon which to go do this, because otherwise you can't do it the way that you sell. You know, anybody can go visit Ogilvy and talk to IBM or Prada, and if you get a buy from IBM, you know, it pays for itself obviously many times over. But it's hard to make that work for the BMW dealership, let alone the dry cleaner or the chiropractor or the you name it. And so what, you know, famously, or what obviously makes scaling possible is technology. So.
I think that everybody in our group pretty much said that public support, all forms of funding, have potential pitfalls and minefields of, you know, the tail wagging the dog. In some instances, political influence, distorting the agenda for news. That said, if you're looking at the world of grants or underwriting or corporate support or donor networks, I think the holy grail that was identified was getting endowed. That would just solve everything. If somebody would just give us $200 million instead of $10 million, all our problems would be solved. Beyond that, there was some discussion of micropayments, and you know, there are several models emerging right now. The representative journalism model, in which you can invite ordinary people to fund a reporter, the Spot Us model, in which you invite ordinary people to fund a project, the VRMs model, the vendor representative matching service that Berkman is coming up with that has software that kind of matches funders with your project, so that there are some forms of micropayments coming forth. There was some, believe it or not, discussion of public funding and that suggestion that CUNY maybe ought to investigate how public funding works in other places.
Raise our $3 million.
Right. Through an internet tax or whatever, there was a lot of skepticism about the minefields that presents in the United States, and a lot of discussion about the fact that that doesn't happen in other countries. There was also, I think, some discussion about you know, a university subsidized model where, you know, if the Boston Globe goes under, could it be taken over by Harvard? They have deep pockets. Could they do something with it? Although those of us who have had to deal with university red tape think, oh my God. And certainly a discussion that that there is case, and probably the most powerful case you can make with funders, is that you're really feeling a need, you're feeling a gap, a vacuum in the community, and that, you know, we deserve to be funded because we are building community capacity. Popping in and out of the discussion, I think, throughout was the sense that there might be more potential for getting philanthropic or charitable dollars, or even public dollars, if you started to reframe journalism, not as an act of information, but as an act of community building, okay? And that you were here to not just maybe, as I say, cover the community, but build the community. And that the merits of that would be that you are very much looking to create a certain kind of value added that is more than you should fund us because you really need to eat your broccoli today and we're doing something very important. So I think, you know, a little bit of that entered into the conversation. And there was a question of whether foundations should be here to just fund business as usual, and as we've always done it, or whether foundations perhaps would be better off in a role as catalysts for not what is, but what should be. Should they be funding aspirations and not just operating? I don't know. What did I miss, folks, from people who were in the session? For CUNY, anybody? For CUNY, there was great interest in CUNY coming up with a baseline model for how much money it would take to cover a modest-sized community with bare essential journalism. You know, maybe a little bit of enterprise, a little bit of government accountability. Okay, and then you know, perhaps comparing different government models. That's it.
So the kid from MTV gets to represent the guys from Harvard and Reuters and such. I'm going to do my best to represent what was a very free-ranging a conversation, fractured maybe, but certainly scintillating. There's a real lack of consensus or conclusion, except obviously that there's value in networks, and that there wasn't a lot of consensus around what might constitute a business model. We departed from Thomas Eisenman's and Tom Evsland's sort of definition of a network. A network is nodes connected by links implying interaction. There was some conversation as to whether that interaction needed to be two-way or one-way. And there was a lot of conversation as to whether aggregation alone constituted a network or whether it was a departing point for creating a network. We discussed at least what in Kinsey and my notes became to be characterized as a hub and spoke sort of old media model of a network, as well as something that Christiana from the World Bank, if I remember correctly, characterized as more of an organic ecosystem. And then the consensus seemed to form around that the best networks are built or grown bottom up. They form organically out of expertise, out of passion, out of niche knowledge, that they lack standardization, that they need to scale to create, obviously, a viable revenue, and that there tends to be a real lack of platform expertise, which is sort of the bottom-up growth of a network. And then the toolkit might come top-down. Standardization of platform tools, centralization of ad operations, standardization of units, metrics and units, ad sizes, that sort of thing. All top-down. You know, there was a time I was mentioning to Kinsey on our mad dash to find some summary. The WordPress was a platform that didn't exist once upon a time, and you know, when I started blogging in 2002, it was HTML, which Google didn't like so much. So it's finding those tools which were top-down for people like me who are trying to find a place to write. So by virtue of a case study, one kind of emerged inadvertently as we spent a significant amount of time talking about the potential for some hyper-local network examples. And Debbie, forgive me if I get your last name, if I mispronounce it, Gallant. Is Debbie still here? Okay. Debbie's at BaristaNet in New Jersey and was giving us a sense of what her operation is. She basically has, please augment my understanding here if necessary, herself and a couple of writers, a couple of stringers. She's doing the graphics herself. She's doing the ad sales herself. Then there's somebody like Mark Josephson, who's at Outside In, as we met earlier, and maybe Meryl Brown, who could potentially serve, who's over at Now Public, to serve to provide the tool set. So you have the bottom up, you have Debbie's area of expertise, her real niche knowledge of her area, and then you have the toolkit coming from the top down and providing the infrastructure and the metrics and all the things that I mentioned before, which, while that wasn't quite the sort of thread of conversation, it was an inadvertent, I'm flipping our conversation upside down because that hyper-local conversation bore out the conversation about bottom up, top down. We ended up with a whole bunch of questions, which I'm not quite sure they constitute charges. If I can scroll down here a second, I'll get them for you. One of the things Kinsey and I were talking about, you know, Kinsey just started over at NPR 4 days ago, and my charge at MTV News very recently is to not land the plane to build a community and to build a network and to, you know, take off the blinders, but to stay in the plane and keep flying and continue to cultivate network. There's a real challenge there for at least any of us who aren't, correct me if I'm wrong, I've been at MTV for so many years, I don't know what a startup looks like or feels like, but there's the real sense that you don't have the opportunity to land the plane as you try and rebuild or connect. So the questions, are networks fundamentally niche? Does it serve the information void? Does it serve the information void if a massive media conglomerate fails, which was a hypothetical presented to us by Thomas? While there may be some hyper-local support on a significant amount of stories, the pothole example comes to mind, local restaurants come to mind, what happens to the investigative institutional, and this is a fundamental question I think a lot of us have been asking for a long time, what happens to the investigative reportage? So will niche networks serve to connect meaningfully to the sort of historically what I'll characterize anyway as corporate infrastructures? So we were left with a lot of questions in our free-ranging conversation.
We did newsroom efficiencies, and I'd like to say that we started with traffic and revenue assumptions and then worked backward from there, which is what we ended up doing. It took us about 2 hours and 40 minutes to work through the methodology that we were going to stick with. But once we settled on it, yeah. So I'm going to get really specific now. It's going to sound like we really knew what we were doing, and we kind of pulled this out at the end. We said that we would be looking at an organization that received 800 million page views a year at $5 RPM, which produces $4 million in revenue. We'd devote 2.6 million of that to editorial newsroom costs. So that's 35 FTEs at $60,000 each. That's $2.1 million in staff costs, $500,000 to make up the rest. And then we said, okay, with 35 FTEs, what do those people do? And I think if there was consensus on anything, it was that we wanted this to be as flat an organization as possible with as many content creators as we could squeeze out of this. And so we devoted 20 people to create content, and that's people who do all of this: blogging, photography, video editing, shooting, curation of their beats, some in greater degree, one or the other, but they're all expected to do all of those things. 3 community managers who do outreach, mediation, social media evangelism, 2 programmers and database managers who are structuring local information so that it has depth and lasting value, 2 designers and graphic artists to make everything look pretty, 5 producers who do daily site management, make everything run on time. And we didn't like editors very much, so we ended up with 3 of them, and didn't talk at all about what the hell they did. But we spent a lot of time arguing about whether there should be a newsroom at all. And Michael Rosenblum, for the record, hates them and would blow them up and burn them down. I think where we ended up agreeing was that we want people out in the community reporting as much as possible, spending as little time in the newsroom as possible, but that there is value in getting people face to face. And somebody made the point at the end that we couldn't have done what we did today if we hadn't been sitting around talking to each other. So some physical space for this. But whether there's a newsroom or not, there are some things we would stop doing. National entertainment, national sports, national international news, editorial page, and that when you take your content creators and create your various niches, in each of those we would look to a community of local bloggers to supplement those verticals, what the staff was doing. Michael Rosenblum at the end suggested that we ultimately were a digital acquisition machine and that we then find creative revenue opportunities based on that content. And that's about as far as we got. So I would say the Twitter version, Jeff, is start with 200 people, fire 165 of them, and pay the rest of them a lot less than they earned before.